My name is Simone Detling, Unipify Banking Commission. I'll be your moderator for the session today. Why dedicate an entire session to sustainable finance specifically for developing countries? Well, the UN estimates a financing gap annually of about 2.5 trillion US dollars in achieving the sustainable development goals in the developing world. That is a huge challenge, of course, that public institutions can't face on their own, but it is at the same time an enormous business opportunity for financial institutions. Of course, business environments are much more challenging in these markets. Financial markets locally are often underdeveloped. The risk is higher. So what we need is some innovative solutions, some innovative approaches that actually enable financial institutions to challenge their capital into sustainable investments in those countries. And luckily, today I have 3, hopefully soon 4 speakers that will present some of such solutions and approaches to working with and for financial institutions to enable them to finance green social investments in those countries. And they are also very much looking forward to discussing with you. I know we have quite a few experts in the audience. And that's also how I would like to start. I would like to see a show of hands who in the audience is actually there from a private financial institution.
Quite.
Okay, quite a few. And maybe we can get one statement, gentlemen in the second row. What brings someone from a private financial institution into this session? Yes.
Oh.
I think there's definitely an opportunity. You talked about the big gap, but there's also an opportunity. The risk is always, you also talk about risk, and risk is opportunity as well. So it's definitely something we'd like to hear a lot more about, because we think, like for Africa, where I come from, East Africa, we think there's a lot happening in the East African region. I would like to see what other people have done and what we can learn from that.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And all you from the private financial institutions, you will have a special role today, because unfortunately I don't have a speaker up here from a private financial institution. So it will be up to you to fact check, to criticize, to be critical of what we're presenting up here, to ask questions. I think our 4th speaker has arrived. Mr. Debray, just join us up here. And you would also be the one to start. So we'll make use of you since you're here now. And it's actually quite exciting to have Paul Debray here, because he has been one of the people really driving low carbon development in West Africa in many roles, for example, as an advisor for his government, coordinating Cote dIvoire's INDCs for the COP21 in Paris, or currently as an advisor to REDD+, developing and implementing a national REDD+ strategy in Cote d'Ivoire. And I think he'll share some of his on-the-ground experiences with us on innovative solutions for financing for smallholder farmers in Cote d'Ivoire.
Yes,
yeah?
Yes. And sorry. We have started in Cote d'Ivoire, as most of the country, African country, and most of the country around the world, with this exercise called the INDC, to define our low emission development strategy for the medium and long term. In Cote d'Ivoire, this INDC was mainly based on, first, a target of reduction of emission to 28%, and it was mainly focused on 3 different areas. The first one is energy, sustainable energy. The second one is forestry and agriculture. And the third one is sustainable waste management. So as regard to these 3 main sectors, the government of Cote d'Ivoire has decided to develop a few initiatives. Some are ongoing related to sustainable energy, but the one we are implementing as a forefront experience is linked to agriculture and deforestation. Deforestation in Cote d'Ivoire, as in most African countries, is a very, very a big issue. Cote d'Ivoire, for example, has lost more than 200,000 hectares per year during the last 10 years, mainly due to agriculture. The main driver of deforestation is agriculture. And the idea is to experience some initiative with the private sector to put in place and develop zero net deforestation strategies. So regarding to these strategies, we have put in place a multi-stakeholder approach to integrate this strategy and define this strategy. And we have a pilot with the private sector from the cocoa industry, such as Mondelez International, such as Barry Callebaut, such as also C'est Moi, which is a French chocolate maker, to experiment what we call the payment for ecosystem services. And this is to link the smallholder farmer to the fight against deforestation, because we want to bring the smallholder farmers to understand, to have a better understanding that the forest has a value, the tree has a value. And from that, and from the cocoa plantation, it can there get engaged in the fight for against deforestation with the support of the private sector, and also with the direction of the government. So this is one example. But we're still looking for a sustainable business case, because when you're planting a tree, the revenue for this tree is coming after maybe 15 years or maybe 20. For example, the cocoa tree, it's only, let's say, 18 months. So the idea is to combine a better revenue approach linked to revenues such as the cocoa with long-term. But I understood this morning that blended finance could be a solution. So we're also looking for this kind of solution. I also understood that, and we're thinking about guarantee to make investments and the banking sector more comfortable in investing in this area, sustainable areas. So this is what I can say for now, but maybe with the questions, or if you have other questions, I could maybe develop more.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for keeping in time. I would allow for some direct questions for Paul before we go to the next speaker. Are there any direct questions from the audience? Okay, we'll keep them for later. I think moving a bit from agriculture to renewable energy, we'll have Françoise Destaille. She heads UNEP's finance unit in the Energy, Climate and Technology department, and she and her team engage with finance sector to mobilize investment for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And of course, one part of her and her team's work is to address gaps in the finance continuum that the private sector so far can't overcome on its own. And we're very much looking forward to, I think, 2 or 3 different examples from Françoise.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to make just a brief few points this afternoon. The first one is that investment, sustainable investment in developing countries is already happening. And I'll come with some data on the renewable energy investment side. The other points, the subsequent 2 points, is really that risks are there. It's not easy, but there are initiatives that can help private sectors invest in these new territories. And I'd like to highlight 2 examples of initiatives that UNEP has been part of, just as an example, but there are many others. And finally, I will touch base on, I think, a new opportunity that many financial institutions, whether it's public or private, should really have a serious look at, which is the Green Climate Fund. So let me first start with what is actually happening already. And a lot is happening. If I take the information, the data that come out of our last report on renewable energy investment, this is a report that we have every year. And last year, 2015, was a triple record year for renewable energy investment. Not only it was a maximum investment ever with 286 billion globally, but it was also the first year where there was more finance going into renewables than in traditional forms of energy capacity building. So that was the second record of that year. But the most important for us today is that last year was the first year where investments in the developing world was higher than in the developed world. So this, and if I can go into the exact figures, developing world investment in renewables last year, 156 billion. So definitely big amounts of money. Obviously, a lot of those 156 billion are coming from large emerging economies, and 100 billion came just out of China only. But behind that, you have India, you have South Africa with a very successful auction program. And beyond those big countries, Mexico, Chile, but also Morocco, Turkey, and Uruguay, all above 1 billion just in 1 year, last year. And below that, things are also moving because in this 100 million and above bracket, you have countries like Thailand, the Philippines, Pakistan, Vietnam, Indonesia, in Asia. You have, in Central America, you have Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica, you also have Peru. And in Africa, you also have countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia. So things are really moving. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying, and you're all perfectly aware, especially those coming from private sector institutions, that you face enormous risk. Even if now you can reach and the level of the cost of those renewable energy technologies are such that most of them, or quite often, you have financially sustainable business models. Still, you have a lot of risk you have to face. Investment frameworks are not necessarily, incentivizing. You're facing currency risk, you're facing technology risk, you're facing off-taker risk. You know all of that. And this is where I come to my second point, is that in order to prime those new markets, to help those first movers, a number of initiatives which are based on a public-private partnership approach exist. And I should really like to highlight 2 of them, just to tell you that many of them exist. So do get, hold of multilateral and bilateral actors, and they will point at you a number of initiatives that can help you in going into those frontier markets. The first one I'd like to mention is the Renewable Energy Platform, Performance Platform, which we call REP, which is an initiative that has been developed by the European Investment Bank and UNEP, UN Environment, aiming to support governments in sub-Saharan Africa. This initiative aims to support the development and financial close of up to 20 projects in 5 to 12 countries in Africa. And altogether, those 20 projects should at least lead to 150 megawatt of clean energy investment. So this facility, which will be run over the coming 5 years up to 2020, does 4 things. And the main objective is really to help the development of those first projects, first of their kinds projects in countries, so that other institutions can follow and find it easier, because those early stage expensive transaction costs would have been borne by those first movers. So the initiative, very briefly, goes into 4 directions. It provides technical assistance to project developers to help them go to financial close. It facilitates the projects access to a number of risk mitigation instruments that the facility has negotiated with specific providers. And it also assists, that's the third line, it also assists the financial structuring of the projects to enable them to have an easier access to public and private finance. And lastly, in certain cases, it also provides results-based finance, so additional revenues based on results, such as connections or a top-up on feed-in tariffs. So financial support also to make those good projects reach the financial sustainability. So this initiative is funded by bilateral efforts, in particular, the UK government and Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So the platform was launched 6 months ago, but it's already happening. There already have been a pipeline of projects and signed support agreements with 2 projects. Very briefly, I'll touch base on a second initiative, which is called Seed Capital Assistance Facility, SCAF, which is implemented by UNEP on funding coming from the Global Environment Facility and also the UK and the German governments. And this facility also takes a public-private partnership approach, but this time also to support the development of renewable energy projects in Asia and Africa. But this time it goes through investment structures. So we partner with investment funds, private equity investment funds, or development companies that have, as part of the investment strategy, an early stage window. And we help them do a bit more than they would be ready to do, or they would have the mandate from their investors to do, which is develop new projects, new technologies in new markets. And we do that by cost sharing a number of the additional costs for them to reach out to local project developers in countries they don't know very well. And we also help them, and that's the second support line, when they've decided to invest some seed capital to bring those projects to financial close, we co-invest with them. So this facility has been running for some years, since 2009. In the first phase, we've supported up to 29 projects in Asia and Africa, 9 countries altogether, and we've enabled seed investment up to 33 million. And remember, seed investment can have a leverage of 1 to 50 or 1 to 100 in terms of final capital leverage. And as a result, 6 projects were seeded and reached financial close, leveraging more than 300 million of investment. So quickly, I'd like to finish by flagging to you this new opportunity, which is the Green Climate Fund. Maybe some of them are familiar with the structure. It's the financial instrument of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. It was built to support developing countries in their efforts to sustainable and resilient development pathways, and it is directed to the support of both adaptation and mitigation. But what I wanted to say is that since its beginning, the Green Climate Fund has been very keen to optimize its relationship with the private sector. They've designed a private sector facility, and they've reached out to financial institutions to be accredited to be able to use their funding. Their funding goes into various kinds of instruments, grants, but also loans, also risk mitigation instruments, even equity. And just to give you some indications, 3 large private sector financial institutions are already accredited. We have HSBC, Deutsche Bank, and also Crédit Agricole. And Deutsche Bank, at the last board meeting of the Green Climate Fund, just earlier this month, got their funding proposal approved. They are going to receive 80 million from the Green Climate Fund to put as anchor investment in a global energy access fund they are raising at the moment for energy access in Africa. So briefly, I just wanted to flag those opportunities, just to give you some illustration of initiatives that can help you in your efforts in sustainable finance in developing countries.
Thank you very much, Françoise. Any questions directly to Françoise? Yes?
Question I have is that you mentioned the Green Climate Fund and its activities. What we'd like to know more about is the transformation of major companies in Europe that are dealing in energy to move towards renewable energy, because they have size, they have scale, they have technology, and some, like GDF Suez converting into NG. Are there other trends like that where large financial institutions are decarbonizing their investments and forcing a shift into renewables, and therefore giving greater impetus to what needs to be done by the large pools of money to be deployed into this sector? Perhaps they don't have the opportunities available to them, but it's a chicken and an egg. Obviously, if there's no money, there's no opportunity, but if the money becomes available, so that is a trend that we would like to see if there is, some views that you could shed on that in terms of, do you see this trend accelerating?
Should we answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, there are many aspects of the work that we all do, in green finance and sustainable finance. We tend, I mean, this is, as a UN entity, we tend to help, those who need more. So we work primarily supporting countries, developing countries, accessing this global international finance. Having said that, we also have a large stream of work which I didn't speak today, but happy to go to in bilateral talks, a large stream of work working on energy efficiency. We see, and we tend to say regularly, that 45% of energy savings, we can achieve, reduction in in energy consumption up to 45% just by being more energy efficient. So we have large streams of work on this energy efficiency in developed and emerging countries. The other thing we do, we also have a large stream of work on technology, making sure that technology is disseminated, and there are a number of initiatives in terms of technology mechanism, just as part of the UNFCCC convention as well. So happy to go into initiatives such as the CTCN, so Climate Expert and Network Center, which supports countries into accessing the technologies and cost-sharing the cost for them to access, technology that seems difficult for them to have access to.
Okay. Do we have any further questions at this point? Otherwise, I would say we move from seed capital from first movers to a country that has been moving quite a bit on the green finance agenda, to China. And I'm very happy to have Kelly Yu here with me, who is an expert on green financial sector development, and she leads IISD's research on green finance in China. And she will give us an idea of the opportunities ahead on green finance in China.
Thanks. In terms of green finance, I don't know if you are aware of, I think most of the audience might be aware that what's happening from G20, that the Green Finance Study Group, which China is co-chairing, and with UNEP as the secretariat, and with UK, the central government, the Bank of England. So based in Beijing, in China, I think there's so many happenings in green finance in the past 2 or 3 years that now I would not exaggerate, but I have to say every day there's an event on green finance, or there's some new announcement by companies, or even by the very high-level policymakers making more and more policy frameworks and policy signals about green finance. It's such a hot topic that you can never imagine just 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And unlike the two speakers give a very detailed introduction of particular financial vehicles or mechanisms that's happening in other countries, in China, I think I want to point out that this systematic change in the financial sector or in the financial system is so important, or that's kind of intention at the beginning when the work started by ISD, but with the very significant leadership by now is leading the UNEP inquiries work, Mr. Simon Zadek. When he was based in Beijing 3 years ago, we together started a research work with the think tank, government think tank, called Development Research Center of State Council. That's the quite high-level policy research institute that could make influence to the high-level policies in China. But I want to say, even at that time, 3 years ago when it was started, our counterparts was the Chinese partner just feel like it's an important subject because it sounds nice and niche, and there are so many operations around, or fragmented random practices around so-called green finance. But what it really means and how to understand it from a policy perspective, and how does China as a huge country, policy is always important and key for all the detailed implementations. So how the system could be changed and how that could be reformed as a constant word in China. That reform could happen in terms of green finance to contribute to the green development in China as a big country. So I think that's the history. If you look back, I think it's all the happenings in China demonstrate that at different levels of how green finance might happen until now, when everyone is talking about it in the country, that at the policy level, as I mentioned, when the commitment by the top leadership to using green finance as an effective tool to transform the economy toward low carbon, toward green development, it's something out there. But this kind of political willingness is so strong and so important. And then next, if we talk about opportunities, is how to translate that political will into practicality. Even in China, when people, all the financial system almost pervaded every corner of the system. Now it's talking about green finance. But if it's just talking, it's really quite, people could be very skeptical about it. Is it real at such high level, and how does that translate into the practicality at ground level? So exactly when we talk about opportunities in China, it's about how financial institutions and the financial market could really implement that high level, policy signals or policy frameworks, and to observe what is happening in China. I think 2 years ago, when the People's Bank of China was involved into the green finance development, there's also quite high-level policies on green finance development in terms of green bond, green bank, green rating, green IPO. All of the financial mechanisms has been tagged with green, that means green finance is happening around all of each of the areas, but still the financial institutions involved are the active players, even the small, but they are active players to think about what can really be done in the market and what could be responded by the market players, and is the infrastructure, market infrastructure is ready or not, and how to build the holistic system, rather than go to each of the areas that could happen anytime, any day, but to make it happen more holistically. So from the financial institutions practice, I think in China, I mentioned just now, green bonds, for example, is something unheard or not really discussed 2 or 3 years ago when we started working in this area and introduced international experts into China. It's something that people think it's still nice to hear about that, but green bonds, so China, that market is still quite underdeveloped. So what does mean green bonds? But the reality is, after 2 years, and now, this year, the issuance of China green bonds takes like 1/3 of the global green bonds issuance. And the numerous issuers in China is ready to be more, issuing more, and the projects, I would say, after the guidelines about green bonds, the issuers just flourishing, and the projects by each of the issuers, when they look at it, people start to ask, do we have enough projects to be invested with the green bonds? And how the use of the proceeds could help or could really present the values of financial vehicles like green bonds. So all these kind of discussions and debate in China is happening, what I mentioned just now. But in terms of opportunities, I think China is quite open and actually quite inclusive in every aspect of the financial system, as long as the green value could be demonstrated and the practical vehicles and methods could be implemented in a way that green development could be driven in that direction.
Kelly, you mentioned a bit earlier about political commitment. Mm-hmm. It seems that the Chinese leadership really signaled strong commitment, and that made the market move. Now we have soon the 2nd year of the Green Finance Study Group in the G20. The Chinese year has been very dynamic. In terms of signaling of commitment, what do you think do we need from the Green Finance Study Group? What would be a wish towards them? What should they do next year to really make your work easier, to really improve your legacy, and also to make your work easier, Mark? I'd like to hear from you, but I'd also like from the audience. What are our wishes towards the G20?
Simon.
Thanks. Simon Zadek, UNEP Inquiry. The first year of the green finance work under the China presidency is interesting, partly because it was in the finance track of the G20. And for those of you who haven't wasted their lives on G20 work, firstly, congratulations. But secondly, what that means is that it's stuck in the track that is the exclusive responsibility of finance ministers and central bank governors. And I'm sure we'll hear from Dr. Rahman in a second on that subject. Unlike if you put the subject of green finance somewhere else in the G20, where it's easy to chat about it, but where finance ministers and central bank governors don't actually have to adopt. So in the first year, the success has been basically that all 20 G20 countries, all finance ministers and central bank governors have effectively said, green finance is our business, and that it is part of the way in which we have to understand the development of financial and capital markets in the future. And this is a huge step forward. This is a huge step forward at a very high level. Of course, what that means in Saudi may differ from what it means in India and France and Germany and Argentina and Mexico and so on, but that high level play is hugely important. Now, two things will happen under the German presidency as far as we can see. One is it will get more technical. So there'll be more technical work on how do you do risk modeling around environment in banks and elsewhere, partly because the more one crystallizes non-green associated risks on the balance sheets of financial institutions, the more comparatively profitable green finance opportunities become. So this is crystallizing unsustainable development as risks on financial institutions' balance sheets. Hugely important. But secondly, there will be a new track of work that is specifically designed to engage non-G20 developing countries. And that is really important because the history of financial market development is the history of excluding developing countries from any say in how they develop and then wondering why finance doesn't flow. And so here will be an opportunity to convene not just the G20, but non-G20 developing countries to get their inputs into some of the international architecture discussions that are happening around green finance. And UNEP, again, is very honored, I think, to be running that platform on behalf of the German presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. So there will be input from developing countries in the G20 work stream. One developing country that really has been pushing this agenda from the beginning was Bangladesh. And one of the people, if not the person in Bangladesh who was responsible for that, sits right here next to me. And it's quite an honor to have him with us, Dr. Atiur Rahman, former governor of the Central Bank of Bangladesh. So, Mr. Rahman, when that consultation comes, what, from your experience, would you give into the process is important to get sustainable finance flowing in a developing country such as Bangladesh? Thank you.
This was indeed a rewarding experience for me, not only as being a governor for 7 years from a developing countries, pushing many unconventional areas of central banking, including the green finance, financial inclusion, socially responsible financing and all that. But also it was my pleasure, I would say, working with people like Simon in Inquiry, the UNEP Inquiry, where we work together, all developed and developing countries together in terms of designing that how to make finance sustainable. So that was very, very rewarding experience for me as well. Developing countries by nature, as you know, if you talk about the financial system of the developing countries, it's essentially banking. This rudimentary with a lack of supervision, and it's mostly banking. The finance, other areas, the regulators are working, but it's also emerging, insurance, stock market, these are still not so much stable and credible as the banking. So central bank as a major regulator has an important role to lead the sector. And we can see that, you know, most of the banks, you know, in developing countries, they are like any other bank probably, you know, they are short term in their approach. And also, you know, there are a lot of state-owned banks in the developing countries, and that also makes very difficult for a regulator to really regulate. And if you really want to touch the ground and go for changing the real economy, the finance must reach the ground actually, which is the objective I really pursued, you know, while I was talking about. You know, I can just show you part of this, you know, here, that, you know, I wanted to reach the ground, you know, because, you know, and this is an opportune moment. I think all of us need to really rethink our approach to financing, particularly the post-SDG mandate and the Paris Agreement or the Addis Ababa Agreement. We need to really take the finance to the real economy and to the base of the pyramid to deliver prosperity for all, poverty for none, and respect for the mother nature. But unfortunately, if you leave it to the market alone, you know, this may not happen. You know, market has an invisible hands. That's true. Market may have hands, but market doesn't have always the soul or the conscience, you know, what I'm talking about. That doesn't mean I'm not going to undermine the market. Market, it cannot be, you know, one cannot really go without market. It's only when market really comes in, you know, things go like wildfire. So you need to also guide the market, incentivize the market, and take the market on, you know, actually. But one should not leave everything to the market, because there are very structural failures, governance failures, you know, those failures market alone cannot really handle. So I think given these kind of challenges, you know, still countries like Bangladesh or even Kenya or Morocco or Jordan, many of us are still trying some innovative solutions. I think these innovations, you know, which we have already been doing in our part, despite being, you know, short of our resources, we being the victim, some of us, Bangladesh being the victim of the climate change, you know, even being a victim, morally we are on a higher ground because we have shared our meager resources for addressing the climate changes. And we have our own funds. We take our fund from the budget and take it. And again, we have reorganized the central bank, you know, to become more responsive, more inclusive. You can see that, you know, we have come out of our conventional shell. The central bank need not always focus on, you know, inflation, need not always be conservative enough. You know, you can go beyond and you can address yourself as a developmental central bank, because the central bank has that kind of, you know, credibility and authority to really instill the ethos into the financial actors, you know, the financial institutions, to go beyond their conventional kind of approach and really touch the ground, be more environmentally sustainable. And this has not been very easy. In fact, I tried it very strongly in Bangladesh. There are lot of resistance from within and also from outside, but, you know, finally we could incentivize banks. This word is very important. Incentivize the banks. You know, how do you do that? Through targeted, catalytic, and low-cost refinancing. The banks will not probably initially come in, but you can create a lot of refinance so that they can come in and take the fund and then give it to the entrepreneur. Let me give you an example. You know, Bangladesh is very good at, you know, producing the textiles. You know, and there are thousands of them, but many of them are state-of-the-art factory. They want to go green, and as soon as they wanted to go green, we created a special fund in the central bank so that the bank could have an access to this low-cost fund and give it to that factory who wants to go green. And so small leverage from the central bank, they went green, and they are now charging probably $1 more than what they used to charge to the consumers in the West, who want to go for green products. So that's how you can bring in, if you really want, and we have done that, and we have been really facing this challenge of urbanization, which is very, very intense. I give you just one example. The RMG sector, the ready-made garment sector, use water 4 times the water we use in Dhaka city alone. So that kind of problem we have. So we got to be energy efficient, water efficient, and for that the technology needs to come in. So a lot of things one can do if they want really, and for that reason, central bank in Bangladesh started prioritizing inclusive finance. We said, the Western central banks have helicoptered money, for their monetary policies. We said we will take the money with a block cut, and then we put it on the ground, and so that it comes productive enterprises. And that's how we supported small and medium enterprises. We supported agriculture. We supported this solar homes and all small biotechnology and all that. So that's how we really moved in, and we created a lot of these. It's not moving anyway. And our motto was that we should try many small things, monitor what works and what doesn't work. And through that, we have really created an environment where a lot of things are happening. Bangladesh Bank has created, with the World Bank support, $300 million of long-term project for transformation of these sectors like textile and leather. Another 200 we put in only for the green finance. And also Bangladesh Bank has its own green finance fund, and early on Bangladesh Bank in fact asked the banks to really grade the projects according to their environmental risk management. So we have given a risk management guidelines which they have to follow. And secondly, there is a reporting mechanism. Every bank has to report that which are the industries they are supporting, whether they are polluting or they are creating more problems for the energy inefficient, and they themselves have to lead from their own, because Bangladesh Bank has led it on their own. It has developed the biggest rooftop solar on its own roof, and then also it has asked gone for the I would say automation, digitization, a massive digitization, even in mobile financial services, so that digitization itself is green actually, because you use less paper. So that's how we have been very fortunate to really have created a lot of examples of offshoots from different areas. Now I think we need to do more experimentation, we need to do more institutionalization, and we need to really implement more what we have already started. And finally, I would say that this is an iterative loop, and it has to be market-based, as I said initially, and we should also get support from the finance, public finance as well, because the public finance need to give support for funding and well-designed subsidies, because subsidies can be, as we discussed in the earlier panel, can be a negative factor, if we give subsidy to the wrong sector. So we have to develop a market, bonds like green bonds and rules and regulation, but coordinations is very important. Coordination of the policymakers, regulator, public and private entities, and more importantly, involving the citizens. I think that's the way one can go green. And we have been going green, and we are getting the community organization involved in it, students into it. We are encouraging banks to really give corporate social responsibility funds to really organize ESSEC competitions or other competition with the students, so that we ingrain the younger community to put more pressure on the policymakers, regulators, so that together we go green. And I think Bangladesh is in a very good position now, have a lot of experimentations. This has been documented by the UNEP inquiry. I think we can move ahead from these experimentations and examples.
Absolutely. I think Bangladesh has been quite exemplary. And you've shown how important incentives are. You've talked about carrots and sticks. Kelly, you've talked about commitment, about political signaling. Paul, you've talked about working across sectors, having public-private partnerships, looking at new mechanisms like payment for ecosystem services. And Françoise, you've talked about risk mitigation, you've talked about bridging the gaps. With all these solutions and approaches in mind, the question now is for the financial institutions in the room, so where will the investment opportunities be in the future that we can seize with the support of all these approaches and solutions? So Kelly, in China, where will the investment opportunities be for these financial institutions in the next few years that you see in sustainable development?
Yeah, I think to be realistic, the green finance subject becomes such a topic at a very high level is because of the severe pollution in China. So why we not call sustainable finance? Because we think it's too broad, but that's a focus. The focus is on green. So it's about to fight the pollution, how the financial, the ability to demonstrate that the financial, the real value of the financial vehicles to the solution of China's severe environmental problems. If I can give example about soil remediation, the environmental remediation in terms of air, water, and soil. It's such a big problems. I don't know if you have ever been to Beijing or China, any places. The air pollution, the water, soil is something that daunting everywhere, and China just facing it. If there's no solution, if there's no way to tackle these issues, people dies. It's something that's so pressing and realistic. It's not something that people imagine, no, we should develop green finance. It's about by using all the resources and ways that to tackle this issue and problems. So the opportunities lies on all the different, in the financial market. The players, they're using all the tools, how these tools could be mobilized, by the private sector, be mobilized to tackle these issues in terms of collaborating with the government, the regulators, the financial market players, and communities. Because in China, I think the stakeholders in this issue is quite broad. And as a big country, you have to find a way to get in. So I give example about green funds, green development funds. When China proposed this kind of green funds at both national level and local level, it's really about how these funds could be accumulated, capitalized, and to tackle these environmental issues. So in terms of energy efficiency, in buildings energy efficiency, it's an infrastructure problem that China has been trying to address, that how to make buildings more energy efficient. Mm-hmm. And the regulators, CBRC and the NDRC, the National Development Reform Commission, have jointly issued green guidelines for energy efficiency. That's the kind of guideline which is promoting all the financial institutions, including banks, investors, to work on the energy efficiency and how to capitalize it to help build the market. It's something, I have to say, it's still underdeveloped. Even with the guidelines in place, it's very important. But when we talk to ESCO companies, banks, they admit there's big potential in the market, but how to realize it, how the market players could participate and contribute and gain out of it. It's something that I think in other countries, there's so many experiences that China is looking to. And for the soil remediation as well, the financing models for soil remediation could be something that could be so innovative and new that China is looking to, to learn from other countries, your lessons and experiences, and how in China particularly could create the new ways of tackling these issues. So there's opportunities, of course, there's risks, there's difficulties, but if we look at these massive problems, that's exactly the opportunities for international.
So soil remediation and energy efficiency are two areas where you're looking for good and creative financiers. Paul, Cote d'Ivoire, you've been helping to develop, coordinate Cote d'Ivoire's INDCs. What opportunities for financial institutions do you see coming out of this implementation, of the implementation of these INDCs in Cote d'Ivoire? We have quite a few financial institutions here. Feel free to pitch to them.
Yes, I think that everybody knows that Africa and West Africa is a kind of new frontier for opportunity, financial opportunities. In Cote d'Ivoire, for example, we are now maybe one of the fast-growing economy, targeting around 10% GDP per year. We were talking about also the smallholder farmer. The climate change, for example, is hurting the smallholder farmer, but at the same time, it's also a way to opportunities. Opportunities because so many have to be done in terms of access to improved material, planting material, in terms of access to fertilizer. For example, in most of our countries, we are around 8 kg per hectare, while in most of the countries around the world, we are around more than 50 kg per hectare. Technology also, irrigation. We have also some experiences in Cote d'Ivoire with ecosystem-based adaptation linked to food security, linking energy, sustainable energy, with technology for agriculture. So all these are tremendous opportunities to invest in, and I think that when improving the livelihood of the smallholder farmers, we'll have a most steady economy, not only with the growth rate, but with the development and also with sustainable development.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I'd like to hear from the audience, those financial institutions that maybe have invested in sustainability in developing countries. Some success stories, what was challenging, maybe also some stories of failures that we can learn from, and maybe also some feedback on what Kelly and Paul gave as new investment opportunities. Are they interesting? What challenges do you see? Okay, I'll give you some more time to think about it. But that leads me to a question for Françoise. Françoise, you've mentioned a few financial institutions that are more actively involved in the sustainable finance phase. I think we've seen some on the ground in developing countries. There are some in the Green Climate Fund. What makes these financial institutions different from others? What do you think makes these specific financial institutions be first movers and others come a little bit later? What would you encourage financial institutions in the room to do to become more of a first mover, more innovative in the sustainable finance space, especially in developing countries?
Different reasons. I mean, quite often you hear about impetus coming from the top. That's definitely true for larger institutions, unless the senior management is convinced for a number of reasons, whether it's a risk approach, whether it's an opportunity approach, they have to do it. This is definitely one factor. And I would think, a number of organizations I can think of are having this base of the pyramid approach, because they see that as an opportunity for their business. You know, Paul said it. Africa is now considered as the new market because you have there, you know, double-digit growth rates that you don't have in other markets. I can also give you a very straight answer, which is also fully true, is the return perspective they see. Because I work regularly with clean investment structures and clean energy investment structures, and they've come away from South Africa, where with the very successful tender program the government is having, the returns on their investment in this country is not as interesting as the one they can see, they can perceive in other frontier markets. So they now go into Rwanda, Tanzania, they look for better return, and they look at ways to mitigate the risks. So there are many, many different answers. Definitely, private sector would look at this risk-return ratio, and depending on their risk appetite or the risk appetite of the investors, they would have different approaches. One thing which remains, I think, a frontier for all of us in terms of engaging with the private sector is adaptation finance. And I think UNEP-FI is leading some very crucial thought and research into what can the private sector do for adaptation finance. And this is an area where we should all put our brains together to move forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Françoise. We're getting to the end of our time, so I have one last question for you, Dr. Rahman. You've talked about experimenting, you talked about trial and error. So as a last point, I'd actually like to hear about something that didn't work, but what learnings you took from it and how then afterwards you found a better way and a better regulation maybe.
You know, green finance is a very, very new finance. You know, it's tomorrow's finance. You know, that's why it's not very easy to make it understand all the financial institutions. So central bank has an advantage. Actually, central bank is very credible organizations. It works with the banks, and the banks again works with the different kind of economic actors. So they are the ones who can screen, this is a good project, this is a bad project. And they also have the knowledge where to put the money in the mouth. So they are the ones who know better. So if you can tap that knowledge and use that for policy making, for regulation, that works. And what we in Bangladesh, we did, we motivated the CEOs and other bankers, to go into this kind of tomorrow's kind of financing and give a lot of incentives. That worked quite well. I don't think that it didn't work. Not many areas. We started small, but it has worked. Say, for example, we have allowed the banks, if you really do go for green financing or financial inclusion, if you give more money to agriculture, we will give you more supervisory points for your CAMELS rating. So that really worked. And then if you do more of the green financing, 10 of the top banks will be awarded by the central bank and put it on their website. That gives an incentives to the banks, and they come forward. In most cases, the banks have come forward. What was the problem, I think, and if you said that what didn't work, what could have worked more, is a problem with the public finance, or the government, in the sense that regulations, and its regulatory authorities of other agencies are so poor that sometimes you cannot really blend the two. That becomes a problem. So I give you an example. Say, for example, all the rooftops of Dhaka, if they have a solar panel, and if we can introduce this net metering and tell the the households that you can really sell this energy, whatever energy you use, if you can give more than 10% of your requirement, we will buy this at least 2 taka more than what we buy from the other economic actors. I tell you, there will be a production of about 300 megawatts of electricity just from that rooftop arrangement. So, but that needs a regulation from the Ministry of Power. That is missing, and even if we try, that is not coming. So I thought this alignment of the regulations of the other ministry and the Ministry of Finance and also the central bank, I think these are the areas we need to work together. I think if you tell where is the challenge, I think the challenge of coming together, working together for a common goal. If we can work for that, only then this will be the potentials will be realized. The opportunities are huge, I tell you. But I must thank the government. When the oil price went down, they didn't reduce the price of the diesel or electricity. That gave indirectly some incentive to the renewable energy, because that created some kind. It is because of their inaction was very good an incentive for the renewable energy. So that kind of thing sometimes worked perversely, but again it works out.
I think that's a good final takeaway also, like the idea or the sense that yes, we need to move forward as a financial sector and as financial regulators, but we do need to bring the others along. We need to bring the other sectors, the other regulators along. We can't do this on our own. Are there any final questions from the audience? I'll take one more and then we'll have to close. The gentleman there in the row.
Yeah, that just.
Yeah.
A couple of times today I've heard that we need a regulatory framework that is going to create an enabling environment for financial institutions.
You're hardly audible over here.
Yeah, take it nearer mouth.
A little bit closer maybe, sorry.
A couple of times today, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of times today we've heard that there's a need to create an enabling environment for financial institutions to really get to critical mass in terms of green finance. A week or two ago, I learned that a submission was made into the IMF, and they don't see it being prudent to actually promote green ahead of normal financing. My question really is, who's going to push that to actually create those incentives for us as financial institutions? Because we can't do it on our own. We need the global bodies to help push it there.
I mean, I thought, if you really want to push it, the central bank is the agency which should really push it. But unfortunately, most central banks are a very conservative bunch of people. They don't really want to move in that kind of directions, because it's a as I said, it's a long-term kind of thinking. So a central bank is very good at only remaining narrowly focused on inflation and financial stability. But again, inclusion and green finance can lead to financial stability. If you are working for a positive impact on green financing, ultimately you are stabilizing the market and stabilizing the finance. So that kind of mental transition has not yet taken place in the central bank. But I think if you want to tell me which is the organization, is the central bank which can lead. But if the finance ministry come in with the revenue package of incentives, is even better. And I thought this is the agency which can take it forward. I just want to touch one point which I missed, is the technology we didn't talk about. A lot of technological, breakthroughs are taking place, and that is green, I would say. In Bangladesh, I as a governor, I gave a guideline and encouraged mobile financial services. Kenya has done it, but we have done it bank-led. through the banks, and it was very well regulated. And our mobile financial services has become a global story. As you know, bKash is an organization which is now catering to 25 million accounts, and every day they are providing about 700 crore taka. In a year, about in a month, more than $1 billion going from urban areas to rural areas. It's other way of flow now. The money, even all the rickshaw pullers in Dhaka send their money through the mobile financial services. So this has become real sustainable in the sense that it's touching the ground and doing at the lower ends. I thought these technological breakthroughs, I think one should take advantage of it, and that's what we have exactly done in Bangladesh. We have digitized the entire financial system and payment systems, a revolution in the payment system, and these are all aimed to inclusive and help all others who are not in the conventional system of the financing. So that's how we can move in.
Perfect. A lot happening.
Yeah.
Often more innovative thinking in developing and emerging markets, especially among established institutions. I would like to thank very much my fantastic speakers up here. I would very much like to thank the audience. I hope you took away something, you learned something, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I hope I see you tonight at the dinner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.